I'm resident of Collinwood for YouTube Jules Sprains. Join Funny Patrick.
Jewel, I can't. I'm Patrick McCray. I can't believe you would say that about DeForest Kelly
I know.
at that advanced age.
I know.
Jewel, there are things he can't do, and you're making fun of him for it. Hi, folks. I'm Patrick McCray, author of the Dark Shadows Daybook. But you know what he wasn't too old to do? Learn from his mistakes.
Oh my God. Now let me ask you a hypothetical. Okay?
Sure.
Let me ask you. Who would do better in a promo, okay? A promo. Trish Stratus or Laura Parker?
What are they doing?
Cutting a promo. Just cutting a promo on each other.
Who's Trish Stratus?
She's a wrestler.
Oh, I mean, would she? Well, I believe she would savagely beat Miss Parker, and a lot of lawsuits and jail time would ensue.
I'm gonna put my money on Laura Parker on this one. I think she'd cut I think she would out promo Trish Stratus.
Okay, but they're not savagely beating each other with like small pry bars.
No, in wrestling, a promo is just out talking somebody on the mic. That's what a promo is.
Oh, why didn't you say so? Yeah. Well, in that case, Laura Parker, obviously, and I don't want people to listen to this. So go away. No, seriously, I don't want people to listen to this and think that I am in favor of the physical abuse of any Dark Shadows cast member for Jules Sane's amusement. That's not who I am. That's not what I'm about. And the fact that he just continually talks about this Al Roker, whoever she is, this Trish Strauss, that I don't know. I just have a lot of mixed feelings. So, Joel, we're not going to talk about Glow at all. I bet you anything we could do an entire podcast about Glow and never mention Glow. It's like Fight Club.
Actually, I watched a couple episodes of Glow and I watched the documentary. And I feel the guy who directed these women, who wrote for these women as well, who directed them, I feel he should have at least made some comments into the camera. I know he was at the reunion with them and he was very pleasant toward them. I don't get mad at him because he was hard on them, because I mean, look, directors tend to be hard on actors or actresses. That's how they get the best performance out of you.
So that's why I think I would triumph over Danny Horn. Joel, and I hope you got every word of that. In a wrestling match.
Well, yeah.
Are we on the air?
Yeah, we're recording, dude.
Hi, Danny.
Well,
he only writes about superheroes. I think I'm in trouble. That's a don't mess with the guy who talks about superheroes. It is true.
What I was saying was, like, the guy who directed the female wrestlers, and he did not get interviewed for the documentary. He declined, but he did show up at the reunion.
Matt Sim?
Yeah, and he was very pleasant toward them, and they talked about how much of a hard ass he could be. And in all honesty, I don't mind that, because directors, a lot of the great directors tend to be hard asses to get the best performance out of you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as a director who's not, I'm Lord Easy Street. Yeah, what you say is true.
What's your biggest takeaway from the documentary?
From the documentary, that I now unfortunately have mixed feelings about Pia Zadora. Seriously, because she's kind of blamed for the end of Glow. This was a burgeoning entertainment franchise. It kind of got cut down in its prime because of her. and her weird jealousy issues.
It's interesting because by the time Glow ended, WWF could have gave contracts to all these women, and they gave a ton of talent for Alundra Blaze to wrestle.
It would have been really impressive.
Like, well, that's the thing. Like, when you think about when Glow ended, and the reason Alundra Blaze leaves the WWF, she left the WWF because there was no women to wrestle. Women's wrestling in the 80s for WWF was non-existent, really.
Oh, trust me. I mean, I tried for years.
And it really reemerged in the 90s, and I give a lot of credit to a lot of people watching it. And like, when I look at Sable's and what she was able to do to like power bomb her own husband in the middle of the ring. But I give credit to Vince Russo because he said, he thought about, okay, how could I bring back the women's title and make it believable, make it respectable again, because it wasn't taken seriously in the 80s. It was non-existent. And he put it on.
You're telling me there's part of pro wrestling not taken seriously. Now, by whom?
Well, in
like the New York Times, what it was
in the 80s, in the WWF, Vince McMahon did not really take women's wrestling. He didn't take it all that seriously. He sort of undersold them. So it's like Alundra Blaze's championship ring. Yeah, she had some people. She had like one or two people to defend it against, but that was it. There wasn't like this big roster of women for her to wrestle.
Yeah.
And like, that's what I don't get. Like, why didn't Vince sign women from Glow?
The women from Glow, yeah. So you don't have to deal with the intellectual property. I don't know. I assume that Pia Zadora's husband basically just bought the franchise and then mothballed it.
Yeah.
Now, Matt Cimber is an interesting character. He is tied to all sorts of sort of like weird stuff, but specifically, I'm looking at this. Yeah. He was Jane Mansfield's bad husband, and seriously, and they'd had a fight, I believe, and she was fleeing him with her agent, having come from Anton LaVey's place, I think, seriously, when they went under the truck, and she died.
Wow, that's crazy.
So Matt Cimber was, oh, wait, hang on. So so the whole Matt Cimber thing gets even weirder. So, cut to the end of this, and, as I said, Pia Zadora's husband, who I guess owned the casino or something, got jealous of the Glow thing, or Pia Zadora got jealous of it and got her husband to put it out of business. So what's weirder is that Matt Cimber directed Butterfly, which was a so-called or wannabe star-making vehicle for Pia Zadora. So like this weird Matt Cimber Zadora Pia Zadora kind of puzzle where something just gets deeper and deeper. Very strange part of this. We just found out. Just came across the desk.
Here's what I take away too from the documentary, and it sort of ties into the first couple episodes of the show where the girls talked about in the interview where they had just showed up for a casting call, and there was this rain, and there was this guy. That's actually the first episode of Glow.
Yeah.
Where a woman and a bunch of other women show up for a casting call, and they say, hey, if you don't want to be here for pro wrestling, then there's the door. And the one woman said how like half the women got up and left.
And that happens in the pilot to Glow.
Yeah, that's interesting. That happens exactly in the pilot episode of Glow.
Yeah.
And I like how it sort of ties into some of the real life things that did happen in Glow.
Sure.
Because I mean, look, in the show, there was the girl was having an affair with her best friend's husband, and the best friend found out about it and was kicking her butt in the ring, and they hire her as their lead, the blonde woman. Which there's a lot of real life wrestling affairs that go on.
Really?
And, yeah, I could give you one for example if you want to know one.
Does it involve Gene?
No,
Because
but
he couldn't keep the women away from himself.
okay, do you know who Jeff Jarrett is?
Jeff Jarrett's the guy who's in that sex scandal.
Jeff Jarrett was he still is a professional wrestler. He wrestles at AEW. Now I want to be very clear about this. The woman he had an affair with is married to him now. They've been married.
Now that's a coincidence.
But they weren't married when the woman he had an affair with, who's now Karen Jarrett, was Kurt Angle's wife.
Okay.
And they had an affair behind Kurt Angle's back. Kurt Angle actually tried to confront Jeff. He goes, "Are you sleeping with my wife?" And Jeff Jarrett's like, No, I'm not sleeping with your wife. And Kurt Angle, he didn't believe it, and rightfully so. And it's funny because this is what caused Jeff Jarrett to get sent home by Dixie Carter in TNA. He had told Dixie, "No, I'm not having a relationship with Kurt Angle's wife at the time." Well, as Vince Russo tells it,
did you just say Dixie Carter?
Yeah, Dixie Carter.
Wasn't she on Designing Women?
No, she was. Her family was a big oil company family, the Carters, Panda Energy.
Okay. Who was on Designing Women then? Dixie Carter.
Now, so Dixie Carter was the person giving the money to Jeff to run TNA.
Got it from that fashion company.
And
Designing Women.
She told Jeff Jarrett, she goes, "If you're lying to me, I will send you home. I will fire you." And so Jeff goes, "No, I'm not having an affair." Well, as Vince Russo tells it, he was at Walmart at the toy aisle shopping for his kid. And he got a phone call on his cell phone, and it was Dixie Carter. He was the writer at TNA at the time. And he answers the phone, and she's screaming at him. She goes, "How could you not tell me?" And he's like, what are you talking about? Because he didn't know either. And he didn't know that Jeff cared for having an affair. And she's like, "I got invited to a party." And he goes, "Okay." And he goes, "A party that Jeff Jarrett and Karen Angle were holding together to announce their relationship."
Okay. Now, was she married to Hal Holbrook at the time?
I don't know.
Because she was married to Arthur L. Carter, George Hearn, and Hal Holbrook.
I don't know, but she was furious. She sends Jeff Jarrett home. They suspend Jeff Jarrett from the company. Dixie Carter does, and that's a real life. At one time, it was an affair, but they are happily married. Obviously, Jeff Jarrett and Karen Jarrett now. I'm not trying to throw shade at either of them. I'm just saying what happened.
No, I would say that Carter's appearance in Filthy Rich paved the way for the more notable role, that of sharp-tongued liberal interior decorator Julia Sugarbaker in the 1986-1993 television program Designing Women, set in Atlanta, which I'm sure is near some sort of wrestling thing.
Is this Dixie Carter? Is she a redhead that you're looking at?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, her
Her middle
family,
name is Normus.
her 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 family is also they were an a big oil company. Her father and mom were they were big oil magnates too. So
Uh-huh.
and so Dixie gave Jeff Jarrett money to run TNA wrestling, and Dixie being the money and controlling the money, when she found out about the affair, she sent Jeff Jarrett home because he lied to her about it initially, um, which is just weird when you think about it. But with Glow, when I think about Glow, the documentary too in the series, you
Uh-huh.
hear about how they weren't at first they weren't really trained right away. They were more, they were more being given, like, they were trained very little. They were trained sort of how to fall, and then they were shown moves later on. And that's pretty much how the series goes too, which is interesting. They talk about how they stayed in a hotel and how they had curfew. That's actually in the series as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and how some of them they now in the series, the biggest difference is the one woman just says, well, I could fire you or send your butt home. She's just more threatening them to send it home. She's not fining them that I know of, that I've seen yet. Again, I'm only so many episodes into this. But with the documentary, they talk about how they would get fined $50, et cetera, for being late if they weren't in time for curfew. If they were caught doing drugs, they were fired. They had to, not party, all that stuff. And the baby faces had to be separate from the heels. They couldn't call each other by their real name. They had to call each other by their stage name. That I can see, because the one thing you hear about in old school wrestling is kayfabe, 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 which is
What is that?
well, kayfabe is basically like, let's say if you'd walk into a wrestling locker room back in the
Uh-huh.
day, let's say of the National Wrestling Alliance. Let's say you walked into a wrestling locker room and you saw Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, and J.J. Dillon. Well, you would have
Doing
to
what?
just if you just saw them in a locker room,
Well, it
you
depends on what they're doing. I mean,
you would
they sound
have
like
to.
athletes to me. They probably are changing out of their singlets or something. But if they're like looking at each other too long and they're married, then we gotta have a talk, because
and
something's
you,
fair.
and you would,
So now,
you would
which of these wrestlers did you, Joel, Sane, just accuse of being gay? I just want to get that you've gone on record on the air to out
oh,
them.
oh my
You
god,
feel this is empowering, and it is. So
if you went into the locker room, if you went into their locker room and you saw them, and you had a camera because you were part of the crew, to interview them,
a camera because you were part of the crew in the
you
locker room.
you'd have to address them by their names, their
I,
wrestling names, not their real names. Like, for example, Ric Flair's real name isn't Ric Flair;
I get
it's
what you
it's Richard Fleer. Arn Anderson's real name isn't Arn Anderson; it's Marty Lundy. You
now.
couldn't
Did any
call.
people at the Daily Planet know that Artie Lundy had the secret identity? Did Lois and Jimmy ever catch wise?
Oh my god! Oh my god! But
Talking about
my
wrestling
point,
dread.
my point is, you couldn't go into a locker room and call them by their real name. You had to call them by their stage name, because again, that was a part of keeping kayfabe.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in WWF. Like, if you'd go into the locker room and you'd see Hulk Hogan or Randy Savage or Hacksaw Jim Duggan, you couldn't call them by their real names. Um, you just couldn't. But
No, that's why they always called each other darling.
I have a fun little. Did you know Hulk Hogan's the song "Real American" was not written for Hulk Hogan?
Uh, no, it was written for Roman Polanski. Who was it written for?
Nobody really specifically. It was just a
That's
song that
smart.
was written by a band, and they had contacted the WWF to put it on their album as well, because they were trying to get this song on as out there as much as possible. It was already on their album, the band that wrote it, but they wanted it on another album, and wrestling was becoming popular at the time. And they said, "Hey, can we put our song on your album? It's called Real American." And they said, "Yeah, sure." And when they heard it, Vince McMahon immediately thought of Hulk Hogan.
Sure.
But it wasn't written for Hulk Hogan, though.
Whose real name was Terry something.
Terry Bollea.
Okay. Now, what's Hulk doing now? Is he still with us?
Yeah, he's still around.
Okay. What's he up to?
I think he runs a beach shop in, I want to say, in Florida. I could be wrong there.
All right.
I think it's a restaurant or something.
Was he considered for the role of the Hulk?
I don't know. I do know that he was in many movies like Mr. Nanny and what's that movie called with him and Tiny Lister?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
My Wife Hulk Hogan.
I forget what it's called, but there's a movie where he plays a wrestler. Terry Bollea / Hulk Hogan plays a wrestler who called Rip, and basically it's a knockoff of the Hulk Hogan gimmick.
I thought it was like Reading is Fundamental. Or
Tiny Lister plays the character Zeus in the movie. Then there's Urban Commando. Hulk Hogan was in. I don't know if I do know that when Eric Bischoff pitched the NWO to Hulk Hogan initially, when he pitched him about being a heel, Hulk Hogan told Eric Bischoff to get out of his house.
Really?
Yeah. And Eric Bischoff, he talks about it to this day. He goes, "Look, I get why he told me to get out of his house." He goes, Hulk Hogan had an image to protect.
Yeah.
And here's a guy who's been telling kids to say their prayers and take their vitamins. And here's a guy who goes to charity for kids all over the world. He had that image to protect. I understood that. I wasn't insensitive to that. He goes, so when he told me to get out of his house, I did. But he goes, I always hoped that he would come around. And when, Jimmy Hart was sending them the tapes of the NWO, because Hulk Hogan was filming a movie called Santa with Muscles at the time the NWO was going on. And Jimmy Hart is an old-time wrestling manager. He actually had a very hefty feud with the great Jerry Lawler.
About what?
In Mid-South, they had a wrestling feud.
I thought they actually got into No, I'm very serious. I thought they got into disagreement about something.
But Jimmy Hart, he's managed, the Nasty Boys. He's managed Hulk Hogan. He's managed a bunch of people, a bunch of tag teams. And he had this megaphone. He'd shout and so he was sending the tapes to Hulk Hogan, and Hogan called Bischoff. He goes, "Hey, who's your third man? Do you have a third man?" "No." "Who do you think it should be?" He goes, "You're talking to him, brother." He goes, "I'll be your third man." And Eric Bischoff admits that when Hogan wanted to be the third man, the whole day, even at Bash at the Beach, he had a backup plan, because Bischoff's initial guy to be the third man was Sting in WCW, the face painted character.
Sure.
And Bischoff has said many, many times that he was very, very hesitant, that he thought he wasn't even sure Hogan was going to show up. And he goes, but when Hogan did show up, he goes, he told him, because Hogan didn't show up till after everybody got into the building, after all the fans and stuff. And Bischoff was sitting in the crowd, up in the seats, watching the match. And he said when Hulk Hogan came out, he had known Hogan was in the building. He kind of figured Hogan was coming out because he had talked to him prior to going up into the seats. He said that he did believe Hogan was coming out. When Hogan came out, he knew what was going to happen. He goes, but up until all that, he had said that Bischoff was nervous that Hogan was going to pull back, even when he got to the building, because when he talked to he goes until he talked to him, he said that's when he knew Hogan was committed to it. When he talked to Hulk Hogan, and he goes, because Hulk Hogan's thing was with joining the NWO. Okay, after I join the NWO, what's next? What do we do next? And Bischoff told him, he goes,
King Lear.
well, you won't come on Monday Night Nitro the next night. You'll come the following week to build up the suspense of you turning bad. And when you turn bad, you'll come in there and you guys will beat up some baby faces and stuff. And there was an incident in when Kevin Nash lawn darted Rey Mysterio into the trailer, the sound trailer, which was funny. It was a good bump by Rey Mysterio. Just craziness. But back to Glow.
I'm hypnotized.
I'm here for your wrestling knowledge. I'm here to give wrestling knowledge, I suppose. But with women's wrestling though, Glow, if Vince McMahon or even WCW would have bought, not necessarily Glow itself, but would have hired some of these women to wrestle, it would have gave a big shot in the arm to women's wrestling, because at the time, women's wrestling really wasn't that big of existence. It really didn't fully start to come back until the Attitude Era, and when the Attitude Era had faded away, it went out again. And then there was the women's revolution in WWE, where they're okay, now women's wrestling is back. It's like, okay. And when you see the women now, it's like, okay, they're performing very, very well. And you sort of hope that they continue this and don't ever put it on the back burner when you do watch, because the women can be very entertaining. I mean, some of them cut better promos than the men.
Yes, I would agree. Such as the one between Laura Parker and Laura San Giacomo, whoever it was. Well, why were you pitting them against each other?
Well, okay. I said Laura Parker and Trish Stratus. And the reason I picked them is because they're both blondes.
Okay. Sure.
And Trish Stratus she's good on the mic. Laura Parker would be excellent on the mic. We've seen her as Angelique, for God's sake.
Sure.
I would like to like.
Now wait. On the mic, who is Mike? No, who are you?
On the
Who's this character of Mike that they're
the microphone, the mic.
Oh, I thought they were like on some poor man who's like waiting on a bus or something. You changed the story entirely, Bill. You're running amok. I can't keep up with these.
No, I'll tell you,
flights of fancy.
I'll tell you this though. I would love to see, for a fantasy tag team wrestling match, Jonathan Frid teaming up with Laura Parker versus Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman.
These poor people. Well, I think Jerry's going to win. I mean, the Canadians are known for their fierce, that Canadian Knoxvillian collusion that you so rhapsodize about is yes, boy, Joe, you're a dangerous man. So tell me more about these impulses.
God. Well, I'll do some more fantasy booking for you, and then I'll discuss some more wrestling.
No, that's fine. I have a fantasy of discussing Glow, the TV show also.
Well, the TV show is pretty good. From what I gather from most part,
good.
The TV show is pretty good because a lot of the documentary that talks about it feels like the show is following for the most part what happened.
Yes.
And I like that because accuracy is always important when you're telling a story, especially about an organization that's no longer around. Because especially WWE plays revision a lot with WCW.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, they lie their ass off. And yeah, they do lie their ass off. Now with Glow, I'm glad that nobody's lying about it. I I am enjoying the show for what it is, the stories that they're telling within the show. I love how you have a woman who was struggling to find her character, and finally she starts speaking Russian, and now she's going to be this Russian heel.
Yeah.
But she had to now go to the same woman whose husband she slept with. Oh, hey, will you work with me? And finally, the woman saw, okay, I'll work with you, because as that woman learned at a wrestling show, hey, you don't have to like the person you're working with.
Yeah.
You just have to trust them.
I thought this would appeal to you. And I'm not saying it didn't. It's a very fine show. I think it has some Emmys under it.
I like how they're now in the first episode. Do you know the guy in the ring who's training them to begin with? You know that is an actual.
Who is it actually?
That's an actual wrestler. He goes by the name of John Morrison.
Okay.
He's wrestled for WWE twice under that name, John Morrison. So he has been has been a professional wrestler. So they also had a couple other ex-WWE guys in here. They had Titus, who played one of the Samoan brothers, coming out. He wore the jersey. They also had I'm trying to think of his name. The guy, I remember his finishing move. I'm trying to think of it, because his finishing move was the dick.
Was it a flick or a twist?
It was the dick flip.
Anyway, go on.
His finishing move was the dick flip.
I have to hear that sentence one more time, because I don't think I heard what I think I heard.
You heard correctly. His finishing move was the dick flip.
So we've gone into the locker room with cameras claiming to be the media. These men are together, and now you're telling me there's some sort of exotic dessert.
No, it's just how it's weird how I'm trying to think.
It's all perfectly normal. It's perfectly normal.
The wrestler I'm thinking about who was in it was also in the episode. He was the guy who wore the money robe.
Yeah.
He's the guy who's the finisher, who was, again, I can't think of his name, but and I'm sure there are other wrestlers who are going to be in the episode, so I'll look for them.
Mm-hmm.
I am curious to see if any female, because I tried to spot any former female wrestlers in this episode. So far, I haven't seen any, and so I'll look for those as well, not just the male wrestler, because the male wrestlers stand out a little more, because again, they're in front of the camera a lot more too. I do know that the woman who played Awesome Calm was in this series, so I think she is in these episodes. So there is that. I do enjoy this. I mean, it's very entertaining, for one. And that's the thing too. Like wrestling, when you're telling a story about a real life organization, you have to make it interesting and entertaining, and that's exactly what this show is.
Well, I would agree, and I think you'll see even more, in it as you keep watching it. This is a show I really just sat and watched all the way through, and I wasn't planning on it. And a couple of friends of mine who were women were over, and that to me is a very fair audience for this type of show. And we were just hypnotized by it. We really were.
Yeah. What's your biggest takeaway from the entire show?
Oh, each season is a little different. I think art is where you find it.
Yeah.
That's my takeaway on this. Art is where you find it.
Yeah. I think that's the thing too. Like with when you look at wrestling in a sense, in every way, there were one point in time there were territories. shows. Like there was Mid-South, there was Georgia Championship Wrestling, there was the AWA, and there was Texas. Then there was obviously New York's WWF, and Vince McMahon Jr. just bought up all those, bought up the territories. He outbid them, and then there was just Vince McMahon, and then there was Jim Crockett Promotions, which was the National Wrestling Alliance. And then eventually Jim Crockett Promotions sold to Turner Home Entertainment, Ted Turner. And Vince McMahon wrote Ted Turner a letter. Did you know that?
No. Did it have perfume on it?
No.
What sort of letter?
No. He said that he should sell the National Wrestling Alliance / WCW, because it would be a stain on his good name, on Ted Turner's good name. And Ted just like, whatever, and didn't sell it. He eventually hires this guy named Eric Bischoff, and Bischoff makes a lot of smart decisions, and the Monday Night Wars start when Eric Bischoff decides to put a Monday night program called Monday Night Nitro opposite of Monday Night Raw, and their first episode was actually held in a mall, and not just any mall, the Mall of America in Minnesota.
And so what would you say is the greatest consequence of that today?
To me, it was the best. The Monday Night Wars were the best thing to happen to the wrestling fans.
Those are big words. Why do you feel that way?
Because people talk about how today is the greatest time to be a wrestling fan. Here's my issue with that statement. I grew up with I didn't start as a wrestling fan when the Monday Night Wars. I became a wrestling fan in 1989. I saw Andre the Giant grab Hulk Hogan's chain and shirt and just tear it down. I saw WrestleMania 3 and saw Hogan slam Andre the Giant. That's when I became a wrestling fan. I was hooked. I wanted to see more. I wanted to see more storytelling. My favorite wrestler was Junkyard Dog, JY.
Sure.
For sure. He would wear this big chain around his neck and stuff.
He brought toilets to the toy world.
And you had all these other great wrestlers like Macho Man Randy Savage, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Ultimate Warrior. You had the Hart Foundation, who actually was originally a heel tag team that teamed up with the Honky Tonk Man. Which was crazy.
I never thought the Honky Tonk Men would go for it. And then there we were. No one could have predicted it.
And then there was Demolition. They would wear this black leather to the ring, and they were just scary to look at. And then there was the Bushwhackers. They were just a funny tag team.
But they had very happy wives. Continue.
There was the Rockers, Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels. And then Shawn Michaels turned on Marty Jannetty by super kicking him through the barbershop window.
I've never heard that part of the body called that, the barbershop window.
I'll send you the video of what happens. But obviously the Hart Foundation, Bret Hart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, his brother-in-law, Owen Hart would wrestle in WWF under his own name and under the Blue Blazer in the 80s. He would replay the character later on in the 90s, obviously, and I told you what happened there.
Yeah.
Brian Pillman did not start off in WWF. He started off in WCW, and he was known as a loose cannon. He was working a gimmick to be this crazy wrestler, to be this crazy person. Here's the thing. Brian Pillman literally could sell anybody that he was crazy. This guy, Brian Pillman, could have went on to been an actor. That's how great Brian Pillman was. And I'll show you the video. I'll show you the video that proves that theory. really,
Talking about
really.
like a Lyle Waggoner level actor or better.
Well, let me put it to you this way: Brian Pillman is in his home. He's got a cast on his leg,
Okay.
and Stone Cold Steve Austin is circling the neighborhood, and he's coming to break into Brian Pillman's home. And Pillman knows that Austin's coming, and he tells Vince McMahon that he knows Austin's fears and stuff, and he also says when Austin 316 meets Pillman 357, and Brian Pillman pulls out a handgun and cocks it, it's just pure insanity.
I've never heard of anything like it.
So, Jesus Christ, the things that
Not even him.
Like the things that Monday Night Raw got away with and Monday Night Nitro would get away with is just insane. And I think I talked about that. Okay, when you went into a store when I was a kid during the Attitude Era, you know what you would see? There was a whole aisle, the whole men's clothing aisle, hell, the women's clothing. There was a whole clothing aisle full of wrestling shirts. I'm talking Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, NWO, Rey Mysterio, NWO Wolfpack,
right out of Exodus,
Diamond Dallas Page. Again, you'd walk into a store and there was a whole clothing aisle full of wrestling shirts.
I'd start looking for Rod Serling.
Go into any store today and show me where you see that. You don't.
Not the sort of stores I go to. Now, Jewel, well, the stores you go to are your business.
Well, here's the thing. At that time, you could walk into a Kmart, and that was the case. You could walk into a Walmart, and that was the case. I remember the mall, both Uniontown Mall and Monroeville Mall, had a wrestling store, literally. But here's the thing.
I know, Jewel. I think I remember those.
Yeah, they had a wrestling store where you could go in and buy wrestling T-shirts. But here's the thing. You didn't need to go to those stores because Walmart and Kmart had their own aisle dedicated to wrestling because that's how big wrestling was for the Monday Night Wars. Mm-hmm. You had all these great over-the-top characters that were entertaining as hell. And that's what's lost in wrestling today is the entertainment. There's no, I'm not saying it's the wrestler's fault. It's not.
No, you just said, Jules Sane, say it's the wrestler's fault and that you physically challenge any of them. We all heard it. An open-faced challenge to the most athletic of these gents. You're brave but foolish Pennsylvanian, my friend. It was good knowing you. I can't believe you would say those things about those wrestlers again and again.
Again, wrestling at the time for the Monday Night Wars was it was pure entertainment. And now you couldn't pay me to watch wrestling. And that's saying something.
That's really?
Yeah. It's not. Again, I think they have great performers on there. I think they have good characters. But a lot of the characters are using their own names. Or they're themselves, but the volume's all the way turned up. They're not characters. Okay, Stone Cold Steve Austin was a character. The Rock was a character. Goldust was a character. The Road Warriors, they were characters.
Glenn Beck.
The Generation X were characters. They were a group. X-Pac was a character.
I feel like I'm sitting here with Granny Clampett. Oh, he was such a character. Keep going.
It's the same thing with look at Dark Shadows, okay? Dark Shadows is full of great characters.
Wait, how'd you end that sentence?
Great characters.
Oh, yes.
Dark Shadows is full of great characters played by great actors and actresses. Well, that's what wrestling should be. You have these people who are playing characters, playing their character, but not taking it home with them. it gets back to kayfabing. And I think that's the big issue too, that kayfabe is so dead that it's not even funny.
Yeah.
Like, here's a great example too. Again, I've talked about this. Ric Flair played a character. Richard Fliehr. There's a difference between Ric Flair and the man Richard Fliehr. Like it's not the same person.
No, Richard Fleer's been trying to get his identity back for years as he's been on the run for a murder he didn't commit.
Look at Razor Ramon. Razor Ramon was played by a guy called Scott Hall. Okay, Diesel was played by a guy called Kevin Nash. That's what I mean. Like, okay, Goldust. You know who portrayed Goldust?
Oh, it was Ron Ely.
It was actually Dustin Rhodes, who's the son of the late American Dream Dusty Rhodes. And
Dusty Rhodes was the father of that guy.
Yeah, Dusty Rhodes was a famous wrestler, and he was also a booker and stuff, and a trainer. And Dusty, at the time, Dustin had been fired from WCW. And so when he went to WWF, they said, you know what, we're not gonna call you Dustin Rhodes here. We have this gimmick for you that could separate you from your dad. And that character was Goldust. And Dustin Rhodes sold the hell out of that character. I mean, that's what pre-Attitude Era character, but a character that ended up fitting into the Attitude Era very much.
Now, Jewel, you talking about like the glamour years or something in the Attitude Era, and define some of these terms.
Okay, the Attitude Era. The Attitude Era was.
Oh, I'll show you the Attitude Era.
The Attitude Era was when Stone Cold Steve Austin, became champion. That's when the Attitude Era officially started, was WrestleMania 14. But it had been sort of building toward that moment. You had D-Generation X, who was doing all these very awkward things. I mean, Shawn Michaels got in the ring and humped the Canadian flag. Dry humped it. Like,
and that signaled the beginning of the season traditionally. Would it not normally be the United States president who would perform such a function, such as throwing out the first ball at air hockey or whatever, that baseball?
And you had.
Don't wait for the translation. Answer me now.
You had Mike Tyson, who showed up to be the special guest referee at WrestleMania 14.
Uh-huh.
And prior to that, Mike Tyson had a Stone Cold Steve Austin t-shirt on, and they ripped the shirt off, and underneath was a DX shirt that Mike Tyson was secretly a member of DX. So it's like, well, how was Mike Tyson going to be impartial to the match? And it turns out that by the end of the match, when Mike Tyson counted to 1, 2, 3, and Stone Cold was declared the winner, Shawn Michaels had gotten up and he got in Mike Tyson's face, and Mike Tyson punched him.
How much of that is scripted?
A lot of it,
including that punch.
Yes, I hope so.
Okay. Now, did Roy Evans, did Roy Clark and the other guy, Buck Owens, ever get into this sort of thing?
I don't know, but have you ever heard of the tough guy fighter Butterbean?
Oh my God. Yeah. He worked with us at Jenny Craig.
Okay, well, Butterbean was actually booked in a boxing match with a wrestler named Bart Gunn.
That's the guy who's in the boxing match with Butterbean.
Yeah. The boxing match does not last too long. And as Bruce Pritchard tells this, when they approached Butterbean's people, Butterbean said,
they approached his what? That sounds very personal.
His people, his agent.
Oh, I thought you said his peephole.
No. They they were talking to him, and Butterbean said, "Look, I'm willing to work." Basically, what Butterbean was saying, I'm willing to work this match as a match, but I'm not willing to lose. And Bruce Pritchard could tell right away that Butterbean did not want to hurt Bart Gunn. And Vince McMahon goes, "No, no, this is going to be a boxing. This is going to be a shoot. This is going to be a legit boxing match." And Bruce Pritchard's just like, "Oh fuck."
Bad news.
Yeah, for Bart Gunn it was.
Bart Gunn.
I'll send you that clip too.
Please do. Bart Gunn. You don't have to put out the red light.
For me, women's wrestling in the Attitude Era as well was very good. You had Sable being the women's champion. She's wrestling Luna Vachon, and Luna Vachon was this tough, gritty woman who was just so physical. And
was China mixed up in this era? Was she in the...
Yeah. Okay. She was a part of DX.
All right.
She was Triple H's bodyguard.
Sure.
Actually, Paul Levesque and at the time China, Joni Lowry were dating.
All right.
So I don't think they were dating when they hired her, but they eventually started dating.
Well, good. Make an honest person.
Yeah, so China was a member of D-Generation X, as was X-Pac. He actually was also a member of the NWO, but they called him Six-Pac there. So, and you had that's an interesting thing too about the Attitude Era. You had a lot of jumping. You had WCW buying a lot of the veterans like Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage. Bret Hart would later leave to go to WCW as well. And WWE was buying a lot of the younger talent, like a Stone Cold Steve Austin, like a Triple H, people who were coming from WCW. Now, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, he wasn't coming from a company. He was coming as a strictly a free agent, somebody whose family who had been in wrestling for many, many years. His dad, Rocky Johnson, was in wrestling. His grandfather, Great Chief Peter Maivia, the Wild Samoans, all in wrestling. So, Dwayne's family is another big family in wrestling as well. Actually, I believe his daughter is in NXT, Dwayne Johnson's daughter. So, again, wrestling, as you'll learn, is also a very family-oriented business, if you will. Von Erichs, Harts, Guerreros, McMahons. Let's see who am I else thinking of.
Crosby's.
Well, the Wayne's family, the Guerreros. I've said, and really too, even though they're not a part of wrestling anymore, the Crockett's. Jim Crockett Promotions. The Crockett's were very heavily into wrestling. I mean, they were a big North Carolina company that really was giving Vince. I felt they did give Vince a good run despite all their woes. I mean, Vince was just more of a shrewd businessman than they were. I mean,
it's off in the way.
When you go to a cable company and you say, well, if Vince McMahon went to a cable company and he said, if you choose mine over theirs, if you choose Starrcade over Survivor Series, I will not let you carry WrestleMania. That's what Vince did to the cable companies. He told them if they chose that over his. And after this, the cable company, they slapped Vince's hand like, no, don't you ever do that again.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what sort of started the first initial wrestling wars. It wasn't so much Ted Turner, as much as I like Ted Turner and Eric Bischoff and what they did, especially Eric, it was him getting Hulk Hogan, bringing him in was a smart idea. And, it gave WCW that boost it would needed. Not that WCW was bad prior to Hogan. They had very interesting characters. They had Cactus Jack, Vader, Sting, was Great Muta. I love the feud between Sting and Muta. That's my favorite. That's my favorite Sting rivalry is Sting and Muta. My second is Sting and Vader. Because Vader was just a physical presence.
Is like Vader.
And so, here's a 350-pound guy who could do a moonsault off the top rope. Great athlete. And he wrestled in Japan as well. He was very strong. He was very strong style.
He was known as Super Moon.
He was very, very, very tough. And great performer. And him and Sting had phenomenal matches, and Muta and Sting just had phenomenal matches. I loved Muta's get up, how he'd wear this mask over his paint, then he'd take it off, and you knew this guy was a dirty wrestler. But the way him and Sting would just wrestle each other was so smart, because you're wondering, how is Muta gonna cheat Sting out of this win? Because you knew it was coming. And it's but you're just waiting for it. Sid Justice / Sid Vicious in WCW, he was really interesting. He was a member of the Four Horsemen eventually. Again, my favorite incarnation of the Horsemen is Flair, Arn, Barry, and Sid. Really, really, really good.
Yeah.
Now the original Horsemen are Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Ole Anderson, Tully Blanchard, and J.J. Dillon.
Yeah.
That's the original Four Horsemen. And yes, there's 5 because J.J. Dillon was the manager. So that's my wrestling knowledge for you today.
That's fantastic.
And I know we talked some about Glow. Some. What's something that shocked you about the documentary and the series?
Well, the series just kept getting better and better, shocked me in the documentary. Fiji's love for Matt Simber, and that dimension that brings into the movie. I think it's really, really cool.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing too, they talked about this with wrestling over the years, that you can't help but you're on the road with these people and you sort of get to know them. They become like your family in every way, and that's something that has gotten talked about not just in Glow, but in World Championship Wrestling and WWE, etc., etc. But I have nothing more to add to this, sir. Is there anything you'd like to add? Hello. What happened? Oh. Hello? I think I lost him.
No, I'm still here.
Is there anything you would like to add before we go?
No, I can't think of anything else.
I can't either at the time. Now, if you ever watch Extreme Championship Wrestling on the Peacock Network, which is part of WWE now, yeah, that's a lot of violence.
Yeah.
A lot. And by the way, they've admitted to this. They did not pay to use those songs.
Oh my God. Their depravity knows no bounds.
Well, there was a character in ECW called the Sandman, and he was using Metallica's "Enter Sandman" to come down. They weren't paying Metallica for that.
Yeah, he didn't come into the song "Mr. Sandman."
No.
Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream, make her the cutest that I've ever seen, give her 2 lips like Army Orchard. I don't know anymore.
Is Sunday good for you for Dark Shadows?
Oh, yes.
I'll pick an episode for you. I'll send you one.
All right.
Through the daybook, and I'll message Gordon too when I get done here. For Patrick McCray, I'm Joel Saints. Links to the Dark Shadows Daybook and Dark Shadows Daybook Unbound. The audio will both be in the description box. So go check those out, guys. Patrick, you have a good night, sir.
Engage.
Bye-bye.